All right, good morning. Larry, thank you for coming on this morning. I'm excited what we're going to talk about. I think it's going to be a lot of helpful information for people. So let me tell you guys, I met Larry at a meeting of the Dallas Network of Certified Senior Advisors, and that is a group of people who are committed to helping those in the senior service industry and helping with their clients. We all help older adults in some form or fashion. And Larry, what you do really sparked my interest, particularly because I had just had a client last year who had contacted me to see if we could help them, and they were going through what we're going to talk about in terms of all of their assets being depleted because of a family situation. So, Larry, if you will just tell everyone about yourself, what it is you do, kind of how long you've been doing it, and then we'll kind of get into the meat of what we're going to talk about.
Sure. Thank you, Christy, for having me. Larry Pearce. I'm a certified senior advisor and a certified Medicaid planner with the Langdon Davis Law Firm. I'm not an attorney. I get hired by attorneys and CPA firms and hospitals and long-term care facilities and assisted living facilities and all kinds of people when they have a loved one or a client or a customer that or husband and wife or child or uncle that is requiring 24-hour care and have limited assets, and there's a huge possibility of them depleting their assets in just a matter of months or years.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 39 years now, going on 40. I started in this from being one of those people that had what I called an ailing father and a scared to death mother, that dad's health got to the place that he was requiring 24-hour care. There's never really been a plan for this. What's crazy is nobody really plans for this. They think it's just going to work out. You know, we had this idea that we can foretell the future, and dad's never going to a long-term care facility, or I'll never put my mother in a long-term care facility. And then they wake up one day and there's a stroke or a broken hip or whatever the case may be, and there's no options. They've run out of options. Now they're faced with this dilemma of what is available in an effort to basically, can we have our cake and eat it too? Is it possible to qualify for care while at the same time preserving assets? So that's what I've been doing for a long time. Got started accidentally looking for answers, and a million questions and no answers.
You know, it's funny that you say that because I've talked to a number of certified senior advisors, and a lot of them fell into what they're doing because of something personal that happened in their own lives that they were seeking solutions for. So it is not uncommon for that to be the case. And I think that that helps with empathy towards what a client's going through. You've been there, you've done it, you know what they're dealing with. So, well, let's talk a little bit about that, because I know that what I've always heard is that you must basically have nothing in order to qualify for any type of Medicaid. And
Correct.
and if people haven't planned for long-term care, which if you look at the statistics on that, the majority of people have not, but yet somewhere in the high percentage of people are going to need it. A lot of people are going to be dealing with this situation.
Now, let me tell you some recent numbers. A Metropolitan Life a few years ago did a study, and kind of retracing the last 39 years, there's been a lot of changes. But there's one thing that has not changed in all this time. Number one is this: there's only 3 ways to pay for long-term care in this country. That was true with my father. It's true today. Number one is this: it doesn't matter what it costs. You got all the money in the world, you just pay it. Right now, it's about $7,000-8,000 a month. We'll make it $10,000 a month. We got it. Number 2, previously they purchased a long-term care insurance policy, and some big insurance company's going to pay. Or number 3, Medicaid. That's all there is. Of all the people that are requiring long-term care, let me give the numbers they came up with. Metropolitan Life did a study and found out that 7 in 10, 70% of 65-year-olds or older will require long-term care prior to death. Now, that is a staggering number.
Yeah.
The old principle that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Well, over the last 40 years, there's been a tremendous action of healthcare innovation, advances in science and medicine, and all those things have created a whole generation of people. We can keep you alive, but
Yeah.
if you've got an issue, we can replace that issue and keep you alive. But one thing that I've always said this, there's one thing medicine will never do. And they say never say never. I'm going to say never. There's never going to be a pill. There's never going to be an invention. There's never going to be a procedure that stops birthdays. You can't stop time. So we're creating this whole generation of people that are alive, but they keep having birthdays. And this custodian, this body, can no longer take care. They can take care of your internal organs, keep them working, keep you breathing, but you cannot care for yourself. You can't feed yourself or clothe yourself or bathe yourself or
Right.
medicate. And so that's got to be paid by somebody or done by somebody. And so we've created this. Now we're alive. Mom can't care for herself. And the staggering number of that 70% of the 65-year-olds or older are going to require that prior to death. Now,
Yeah.
at the time you think you need it, it's too late to buy long-term care insurance. It's too late to accumulate more than you've spent a lifetime of accumulation, and they see the loss of their assets depleting in the matter of months or years.
Yeah.
The question you come up with is you've heard that under Medicaid, you are required to, if you're single, to have less than $2,000 in assets. That is true. But the question is, how do you get to that 2,000? That's the answer people don't have an answer to. In other words, you're required, and they call it spin down. But you
Right.
have to define spin down. So people make this jump of this assumption. Well, that means that I've got to pay all mom's or dad's money to the facility until it's gone. Well, that is a method, but is it the only method? And the answer is
Interesting.
no. But you can do it that way. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes people will call me and say, well, I was told to call because we put mom in a year and a half ago and she has nothing left. And my answer is, well, I wish you would have called me a year and a half ago,
Right.
because you spin it down, but you spin it down in a place that you assumed was mandatory. And that's not the case.
Well, that's interesting assumption because I do think that's probably what I assumed prior to even, talking with you. And when I, talked with this client last year, it was, I'm a mortgage company. And so, we look at using home equity for some of those solutions in retirement. And that's what we were looking at. And when he wasn't quite ready. And when I called him back about 6 months later, he said, well, I've now gone through all of my savings and I
Mm-hmm.
can go on Medicaid. And,
Right.
I was like, wow, that is
Yeah.
devastating.
I tell people I can fix the problem as long as the problem exists. If it's gone, I can't fix gone. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
So when you think about when someone should reach out to you in a process like this, is it when the issue pops up and they know they're going to need that kind of care? Is it prior to that? Like, when's the best time for someone to say, Larry, give me some information. I need some help, that kind of thing.
Well, for what I do, the niche that I am in, I'm usually the last resort, rightfully so. And I'll tell you why. Because Medicaid has different rules based upon your status at the time you're applying for Medicaid. And people don't understand this. They say, well, can I go ahead and apply now? No, you cannot apply for long-term care or what they call nursing home Medicaid until you're in a facility. It's just like going to get a mortgage. You go to the mortgage company and say, hey, I want to borrow some money to buy a house. So what house are you going to buy? Well, I don't know. I'm just kind of looking around. And, well, they're going to say, well, you find one and then come talk to us. That's kind of Medicaid. Now, because of that, there's different rules based upon your status. Now, what I mean by status is this. if I know the answer to this, all right, dad had a stroke. Is mom still alive? Is dad going in and mom going to be at home? That's a separate set of rules under Medicaid.
Okay.
Is mom in the facility and dad at home? Well, that's a different set of rules. Has one predeceased the other and the other's going in? That's a different set of rules. Are both in the same facility? That's a different set of rules. Are they both in, but one's in one facility and one's in another facility? That's a different set of
Oh
rules.
my.
So if you were to call me today about what my mother and father should do, I'm going to say, well, for what I knew, I can't tell you, because unless you can tell me who's going to be where, when, there's a different set of rules for that. Now, in saying that, there is some things you can do 20 years in advance. And I'll tell people this, if you're in your mid to early 50s, early 60s, and you can purchase long-term care insurance, I'm telling you, I would do it. And I don't do that. I don't sell long-term care insurance at all, but I'm an advocate for that.
All right.
Because as belts tighten under any governmental program, they're making it more and more difficult to qualify. The answer for probably people in their 50s, the answer at 20, 30 years from now is probably going to be long-term care insurance or your son. But as we sit right now, there are answers to problems that a parent or a spouse facing long-term care requiring Medicaid as their only answer for pay. There's full disclosure, telling Medicaid everything. Medicaid, we want to keep all our assets and qualify for Medicaid. Can we do that? And giving all the information, 99% of the time, the answer is yes. You're not required to be in poverty applying for long-term care. And that is a very misunderstood concept.
I really think it is. Now, what about, when you think about someone who's using Medicaid and their heirs, are their heirs left with a bill, or how does that work?
You're talking about estate recovery probably, and that is a mandatory requirement under every state. The federal government implemented estate recovery decades ago. Texas was one of the last to enforce estate recovery, but they have begun to enforce estate recovery because they were forced to by the federal government, kind of like the seatbelt law. The seatbelt law was a law a long time before they started enforcing that law. So that was kind of what Texas, we're not going to take grandma's house. But they actively do that now. It's called the Medicaid Estate Recovery Program, basically the MERP program in Texas over in Irving. So what happens is this: once a person gets on Medicaid, Medicaid keeps up with those payments that are being paid to whatever facility. And at the point of the client's passing, the state will attempt to recover the monies they paid to that facility from whatever assets remained that they were allowed to own at the time they were on Medicaid. And 90+% of the time, one of the allowable assets that really has any value is the home.
Right.
Here's the other misnomer. The state has never taken anybody's house. They don't take grandma's house. A nursing home can't take your home. But what they can do is, if you don't satisfy that debt that they impose, then they can file a lien against that property so that they know at some point that property is going to be sold and they'll get their share of that proceeds of that sale. However, there is a way to avoid that.
Okay.
Upon the situation, all of that is avoidable. So it's avoidable on two ends. Where I come into play is preserving the assets that exist to get on Medicaid. And then the second step is preserving the assets that were allowed to be owned, house, car, personal belongings. How do we preserve those on the back end? So the challenge is both. We need to preserve the assets that Medicaid requires you to spend down before you're on Medicaid. And then once you're on Medicaid, how do we keep them from recovering those assets after the fact?
I think it's interesting because I think most people who are in this situation wouldn't seek help because they don't feel like, number one, maybe that they have the ability to pay for help or that it would make any difference. And so how how do you get the word out? How do you get people to know that something like what you do is out there and that it's something that they can do as just your average American?
Right. And that is a big hurdle. Uh, uh, I tell people, who is my client? Everybody. Everybody has a parent. Everybody has a brother, sister, mother, father, aunt, uncle that is elderly and needing long-term care. Um, After having done this 39 years, 99% of mine is just referrals from hospitals and nursing homes and CSA people, all kinds of sources. Um, I found out early on that advertising didn't do a whole lot of good.
Yeah.
Is the people that see that, the vast majority of the people that see that don't foresee that being a problem. Oh, that's never going to happen. Mom's never going into a nursing home. I don't need to call. That's why I say people that call me is here's the phone call. 99% of my phone calls is just like this. Larry, Billy Bob asked me to call you. You helped my brother. My facility asked me to call. We never planned on this. We've been trying to care for mom in our house for the last 2 years, and it's just not going to work. But my wife and I both work. We're up against a wall. She's going to, what do I need to do?
You're right.
That's because of that, people attempt, and rightfully so, should. The last place I wanted to put my father 39 years ago was in a long-term care facility, but we ran out of options. I tell people I'll pop off. They say, what do you do? And I'll say, I'm an event planner. And they'll say, what? I say, well, my phone rings because there was an event that occurred, a fall, uh, an accident where they ran out of options. And now they say, how are we going to pay this $7,000, $8,000 a month bill?
Yeah. It can be devastating for people. And I think it's
Really,
also probably something, a little bit of a panic because you didn't prepare and you don't know what you're going to do. And I hope that, you know, through this interview, people will, get the word out even more that there's a solution. And people, I think they hesitate to seek out solutions in situations like that when ultimately it's an important time period in which they should be seeking advice so that they do things the right way. There's so many different ways to go about doing things that require legal help or, expert advice, and people don't, unfortunately, seek out those experts.
yeah. And I tell people all the time that the worst thing you can do is make an assumption based upon incomplete information. In other words, when you say, well, I heard, or somebody said, or my uncle had to, well, when he went to the nursing home, they made him pay the nursing home until all his money was gone. And I said, well, wait a minute. Was he required to do that, or just did he do it? So I tell people, don't do this. Don't make an assumption. There's no hope for me. There's nothing I can do. Mom makes too much income. Dad has too many assets. Dad has a CD. Mom has an IRA. And I tell people, don't make that assumption, because it's going to cost you a lifetime of earnings. I tell people, there's two fears that I saw my mother going through that is repeated over and over and over every day. It's this, the fear of having to make a decision they never thought they was going to have to make. The second fear was losing everything they'd spent their life saving. I'll tell people, I'm not in the estate accumulation business. That's what brokers, investment advisors, that's what you guys do. They call me when they've accumulated their lifetime of earnings, and now how are we going to save what we have? Because there's starting over.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's a great point at which to wrap things up. I am embarrassed to say that I was one of those people who had a false assumption. And so when you and I first met and I heard you talk about this, I was like, this is something I want to get the word out about and help other people. So I appreciate so much your time today and your wisdom. And I hope that people, reach out. Tell everybody again where they can find you.
Well, Larry Pearce, you can find me. My email is L as in Larry, Pearce, Pearce, at LD, as in Langdon Davis, LDATTY .com. L Pearce at LDATTY.com. They can call the office 972-635-2345. But I'll answer any questions that someone may have because we're just here to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christy.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.